Mile 18 of a marathon. Your legs are done. Your lungs are done. Your brain is screaming, stop. Every biological signal your body can generate is transmitting the same message. Quit. You quit. Meanwhile, David Goggins ran a 100-mile race with stress fractures in both feet, hadn't trained, hadn't slept, showed up on a bet. By mile 70, his feet were bleeding through his shoes. He finished. Not because his body was different, because he had built a relationship with suffering that most people never develop because most people never have to. Same nerve endings as you, same pain signals traveling the same neural pathways to the same brain structures, processing the same distress. The difference isn't pain tolerance. It isn't genetic toughness. It isn't a superpower he was born with and you weren't. It's a specific set of psychological techniques for operating past the point where the body's alarm system fires, tested under conditions more extreme than anything you will ever face, and transferable directly to every domain where giving up is the easiest available option, which is every domain that matters. I'm about to show you exactly what those techniques are. By the end of this, the wall you've been hitting will look like a door. Chapter 1. The 40% signal. Here's the most important thing you will ever learn about quitting. You quit too early. Every time. Without exception. Not because you're weak, because your brain's threat detection system is calibrated for survival in an environment that no longer exists. Your ancestors died if they pushed too hard and had nothing left when the predator arrived. Evolution built a conservative shutdown system. Fire the quit signal early. Conserve reserves for the threat that might still be coming. The threat isn't coming. You're not being hunted. You're running a race. You're building a business. You're sitting at a desk writing something difficult. The biological alarm system optimized for savanna survival is misfiring in an environment that requires voluntary discomfort, not involuntary survival. Sports psychologist Samuele Marcora at the University of Kent spent years measuring the relationship between perceived exertion and actual physical capacity in endurance athletes. His finding was precise and uncomfortable. The feeling of exhaustion that produces quitting is almost never correlated with actual physical depletion. It is a sensation generated by the brain as a protective mechanism. A feeling designed to make stopping feel necessary before stopping is physically required. Marcora measured cyclists pedaling to complete failure. At the moment they reported absolute exhaustion and could not continue, he showed them subliminal images, faces expressing happiness rather than neutral faces. Cyclists whose brains received the positive signal continued significantly longer than cyclists who received neutral signals. Same physical state, same muscles, same glycogen, different perception of capacity, different outcome. The feeling of exhaustion is information. It is not a command. The information is your brain's estimate of remaining capacity. That estimate is systematically conservative. The actual remaining capacity is substantially larger than the estimate. Mark Allen won the Ironman World Championship 6 times, the most brutal one-day endurance event in existence. 2-mile ocean swim, 112-mile bike, full marathon, in sequence. He described his mental relationship with suffering in one sentence. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Not motivational language. Neurological accuracy. Pain is the signal. Suffering is the story constructed around the signal. The story is optional. You practice. This week, in any situation where you feel the urge to quit, add 30% more. Not forever. Not indefinitely. Just 30% past the signal. Run to the next lamppost. Write one more paragraph. Make one more call. The brain recalibrates its estimates based on what you actually do. Every time you exceed the estimate, the estimated limit moves outward. The capacity expands not because the body changes, but because the brain's model of the body's capacity updates. Chapter 2. The segmentation weapon. Here's the technique that every elite endurance athlete uses and almost nobody in any other domain thinks to apply. Never think about the whole thing, ever. Ultramarathon runner Ann Trayson won the Western States 100-mile race 14 consecutive times. 14. When asked how she managed 100 miles mentally, she gave an answer that sounds simple and is neurologically sophisticated. I don't run 100 miles. I run to the next aid station. Then I run to the next one. Your brain cannot sustain motivation toward a goal that feels impossibly distant. The distance between present position and distant goal generates a mental representation of the entire remaining effort simultaneously. That representation is overwhelming by design. You, Feel the whole 100 miles in your body before you've run step 1. The feeling produces hesitation. Hesitation produces avoidance. Avoidance produces quitting before the first step lands. Psychologist Gabriele Oettingen at NYU studied goal pursuit across thousands of subjects over 2 decades. Her finding on what she called mental contrasting. Vividly imagining the completed goal before you've started produces a temporary motivational burst followed by significantly reduced effort. The brain experiences the emotional reward of completion prematurely. Motivation drops because the reward has already partially arrived. The solution is not to stop imagining completion. It is to focus almost entirely on the immediate process unit, not the destination. The next step, specifically, concretely. The next step only. Navy SEAL training psychologist Eric Potteratt documented this as the mental skill most consistently separating candidates who complete Hell Week from candidates who don't. Completers almost universally reported thinking only about the immediate task. Get through this evolution, not get through the week. Quitters almost universally reported thinking about how much remained. The remaining distance was the thing that broke them, not the present moment. Your application, any difficult extended task, break it into units small enough that completing one feels genuinely achievable. Not the book, the chapter, not the chapter, the page, not the page, the paragraph. Start the paragraph. The paragraph becomes the chapter, becomes the book without you ever confronting the book directly. The brain never faces the overwhelming whole. It faces only the manageable next piece. Indefinitely. Hit subscribe before you forget. The next chapter is the one that makes everything permanent. Chapter 3. The Identity Architecture. Here's the deepest layer of endurance performance that sports psychologists took decades to isolate and document. Willpower runs out. Identity doesn't. Psychologist Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion established that self-control draws from a limited cognitive resource. The more you use it in a given period, the less remains. Willpower is a battery. It depletes. People who rely on willpower alone to maintain difficult behavior eventually reach a state of depletion where the behavior collapses regardless of how much they want to continue. Elite performers don't rely on willpower. They've built identity structures that make the behavior automatic rather than effortful. The behavior is no longer a choice they make each day against resistance. It is an expression of who they are. The question is no longer, should I do this today? It is, I'm someone who does this. The identity does the work that willpower cannot sustain. Behavioral scientist James Clear documented this architecture in his research on habit formation. The most durable behavior change always flows from identity change rather than outcome change. Don't try to run a marathon. Become a runner. Don't try to write a book. Become a writer. The identity generates the behavior automatically. The behavior doesn't require daily willpower expenditure because it is no longer a choice being made against resistance. Psychologist Carol Dweck at Stanford spent 40 years studying what she called implicit theories of ability. Fixed mindset individuals believe capacity is innate and static. Growth mindset individuals believe capacity is developed through effort. The difference in behavioral output between these two groups under challenge is dramatic. Fixed mindset individuals withdraw from challenges that threaten their self-concept. Growth mindset individuals engage challenges as the mechanism for building the capacity they want. But here's the piece. Dweck's popular framing often misses. Mindset is itself an identity. You don't just think differently. You are someone different. The person who believes their capacity is expandable through effort has built an identity that generates completely different behavioral responses to difficulty automatically. The challenge activates the identity, which generates persistence, which builds capacity, which confirms the identity. The loop runs forward indefinitely. Goggins calls his version the accountability mirror. Every morning he stood in front of his mirror and told himself uncomfortable truths, not affirmations, assessments, what he had avoided, where he had underperformed, what the gap was between who he was and who he claimed to want to be. The discomfort of that gap was not demotivating. It was identity building. He was constructing the self-concept of someone who does not look away from hard truths. That self-concept eventually produced someone who did not look away from hard miles. Your version. Write 3 sentences. What kind of person handles difficulty the way you want to handle it? What does that person do when the signal fires? What is one action you can take today that is evidence of being that person, regardless of how you feel? The action is not for the outcome. It is for the identity data point. Each action is a vote for who you are. Enough votes and the identity installs. The installed identity generates the behavior automatically. The willpower problem disappears because willpower is no longer the mechanism. Here's the problem, though. You can recognize the 40% signal and exceed it deliberately. You can segment any overwhelming challenge into manageable immediate units. You can build identity structures that make difficult behavior automatic. And you will still hit a specific wall that none of these techniques fully addresses: the comparison collapse. The moment you measure your position against someone further ahead and experience your progress as insignificance. Psychologist Leon Festinger developed social comparison theory in 1954. Humans automatically and involuntarily benchmark their status, progress, and capacity against others. The comparison is not neutral data. It generates an emotional response that directly affects motivation and performance. And in the modern information environment, you have real-time access to the curated highlight reels of millions of people performing at the peaks of their trajectories. The comparison environment is historically unprecedented in its capacity to generate inadequacy in people making genuine progress. Theodore Roosevelt called it the thief of joy, and he lived before social media. The thief now has a master key, and it enters every time you open an app. The countermeasure is not to stop comparing. The brain cannot be instructed to stop doing what it evolved to do. The countermeasure is to redirect the comparison deliberately. Compare yourself to yesterday's version of you, specifically, with precision. What did you do yesterday that you couldn't do the day before? What is smaller today than it was last week? The comparison mechanism runs forward, but on a trajectory you control. You get the motivational data the mechanism is designed to produce without the manufactured inadequacy the modern comparison environment is designed to generate. To keep it simple, stupid. Recognize the 40% signal as a conservative estimate and exceed it deliberately by 30% to recalibrate the estimate outward. Segment every overwhelming challenge into immediate process units small enough to feel achievable and never confront the whole. Build identity structures that make difficult behavior an expression of who you are rather than a daily willpower expenditure. And redirect the comparison mechanism toward your yesterday rather than someone else's highlight. You were never someone who quits. You were someone running a survival system calibrated for a world where quitting made sense. That world is gone. The system stayed. Now you know how to override it. But here's the thing. Mental toughness compounds as a skill only when your brain retains the techniques between the moments they're needed. Most people feel invincible reading this and revert to the 40% the next time the signal fires because the framework's never locked in. That's why I made this video breaking down the exact memory system that makes every technique you learn permanently available precisely when everything in you wants to stop. It's almost unfair. Watch it next.